Obrigada. Bom, bom dia, boa tarde e boa noite a todos e todas. Bem-vindos à quarta sessão do ciclo de encontros Gender Studies and Classical Scholarship, organizado pelo EuGeSta como parte de um novo projeto sobre estudos de gênero e estudos clássicos. EuGeSta é uma rede europeia de estudos de gênero na antiguidade e foi fundada pela professora Jacqueline Fabre-Serris, uma latinista da Universidade de Lille, em 2009. Essa rede traz vários pesquisadores de muitas áreas de estudo da antiguidade, incluindo letras, literatura, arqueologia, economia, direito, medicina, filosofia, história da arte, religião e estudos de recepção. E todos compartilham do interesse pelos estudos de gênero. Em 2011, foi criado uma revista de acesso aberto com o mesmo nome, EuGeSta, e editada pela professora Jacqueline Fabre-Serris, de Lille, e pela professora Judith Hallett, do College Park, de Maryland. Mais informações sobre todo esse projeto vocês podem encontrar no website do EuGeSta, de acesso livre. Esse ano, como uma nova fase da rede de pesquisa, alguns novos projetos foram iniciados. E um desses projetos é este ciclo de encontros, cujo objetivo é disseminar publicações importantes na área de estudos de gênero a cada 2 meses. Depois de 3 sessões nesse ano, que foram gravadas e podem ser todas acessadas no canal do YouTube do projeto, nós terminaremos o ano com a apresentação de mais 2 livros por meio de seus autores, comentadores e pesquisadores convidados. Eu passo uma breve informação sobre a sessão, que tem, então, esta introdução, e depois 15 minutos para cada apresentador e 10 minutos para cada um dos respondentes. E, em seguida, 25 minutos de discussões gerais, né, com todos os participantes. Assim, a sessão dura em torno de 1h20, podendo se estender até mais cerca de 10 minutos. E eu não serei draconiana, né, com o roteiro, com o tempo, mas eu espero que todos sigam, né, esse roteiro e, para isso, então, peço a cooperação de todos. Essa é uma atividade também multilingüe, o inglês é a língua franca, mas todos os participantes podem falar nas suas linguagens preferidas, francês, espanhol, italiano, português, etc. A única coisa que pedimos é que uma versão do texto em inglês seja projetada na tela. Nesse formato, nós acreditamos que podemos estimular interações entre os vários participantes e dar visibilidade a um trabalho que vem de várias partes do mundo. Por favor, também notem que os respondentes, eles vão apresentar ou discutir algum aspecto importante do livro em questão. Eles não devem, ou não precisam, né, nem o tempo permite, uma análise detalhada, uma resenha, é um comentário. Tá? Nessa nossa quarta sessão, nós vamos então ter, primeiramente, o livro The Public Lives of Ancient Women, 500 to 650 BC, né, editado pela Brill, e foi editado por Lucinda Dirven, Martin X e Sophie Hemmingsen, em 2023. E Anique Hamelink, que é a apresentadora desse livro. Ela é autora de um dos capítulos, né? Banqueting Women on Tombstones in Roman Britain. Anique atualmente está terminando a sua dissertação na Universidade de Amsterdã, e ela também teve trabalhos temporários na Universidade de Leiden e Utrecht. Ela vai defender a sua dissertação agora no próximo dia 4 de dezembro, né? Uma tese intitulada Monumentalizing Identities, Presenting Dress, Gender and Identity in Funeral Portraits of the Roman Northwest. Então, parabéns antecipadamente. A respondente dessa sessão é a professora Maria Rosa Cid, professora de História Antiga na Universidade de Oviedo e coordenadora do grupo Demeter, e foi também presidente da Associação Espanhola de Investigação da História das Mulheres. O segundo livro é The Strength of Roman Women Thought Coins as a Feminist Critique from the Past to the Present, editado pela FI em 2024, uma monografia de Tais, Pagoto, Bélo, que tem uma formação em arqueologia na Universidade de Campinas, em São Paulo, e que acabou de terminar um pós-doutorado na Université Libre de Bruxelas, com uma bolsa da Fundação FAPESP. O respondente é o professor Filippo Carlà-Uhink, um professor italiano que atualmente ensina na Alemanha como professor para os estudos de História, né, antiga na Universidade de Potsdam. Ele é um especialista em História Antiga, principalmente nos campos da História Cultural, e foi editor do livro The Ancient Magic and the Supernatural in the Modern Visual and Performing Arts, Orientalism and the Reception of Powerful Women from Ancient World, pela Bloomsbury em 2015. Então, antes de eu passar a palavra aos aos apresentadores e comentadores, eu gostaria também de agradecer a Daniela Brinatti, estudante de filosofia do doutorado na Universidade de Minas Gerais, e Caio Franco, estudante de graduação em filosofia na mesma universidade, pelo apoio técnico. Eu gostaria também de insistir, né, que outras atividades do EuGeSta as atividades podem ser acessadas no website, e que nós já estamos preparando também as sessões para o ano de 2025, né, no qual esperamos poder continuar com essa atividade. Então, muito obrigada, e eu passo a palavra para a primeira apresentadora, que é a Anique. Please, Anique, the screen is yours. Obrigada.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So today I will present to you the book, The Public Lives of Ancient Women. I have it here, which is edited by the members of the Department of Ancient History at the University of Amsterdam. And it was created in honor of the work of Professor Emily Hemelrijk's work on the education and public lives of women in the Roman West. And it is created for the occasion of her retirement as Professor of Ancient History at the University of Amsterdam in 2020. And the book features contributions by colleagues from the University of Amsterdam, other Dutch universities, and as well as former and present PhD students, among which I count myself as a PhD student of Professor Hemelrijk. A little bit about my research and the background I have as a contributor to this book. So I am a PhD student of Professor Hemelrijk, and since recently I'm also now employed as a lecturer in ancient history at the University of Amsterdam. And the editors, whom I've had the pleasure of working with for 5 years, are the close colleagues of Professor Hemelrijk and the Department of Ancient History. And they've asked me to present this book to this very interested collective of gender researchers at EuGeSta. My own PhD research focuses on the interplay between gender, cultural change, and dress in the Roman Northwest provinces, by which I mean the provinces of Gallia Belgica, Gallia Lugdunensis, Britannia, Germania Inferior, and Germania Superior to some extent. And my dissertation discusses the question as to how the integration of the 4 northwestern provinces into the Roman Empire affected their self-representation through their clothing, hairstyles, jewelry, and accessories, through funerary portraiture. And this includes their response to the introduction of new elements of dress from other parts of the Roman Empire, and how these people related to established traditions and or initiated creative innovation during the Roman period. And I have thus studied cultural innovation and its relation to ethnic, gender, and social identities through a corpus of several hundred funerary portraits. And I will defend this thesis, as you kindly mentioned, next week at the University of Amsterdam. And one chapter of my dissertation, which is on a collection of funerary portraits from Britain that depict women taking part in banquets in a manner that does not conform to established gender norms within the Roman world, has been published in the book we discuss today. So I thus speak to you both as a contributor to this volume, as a colleague of the authors of the Ancient History Department and thus the editors at the University of Amsterdam, as well as the PhD student of Professor Hamelink. The central focus and aim of the book was intended to celebrate the work of Professor Hamelink and to build on the foundations of her study into women's education and their public visibility and agency in the Roman world. In her publications over the past 30 years, Professor Hamelink has made a significant contribution to Roman gendered social history in bringing Roman women out of the domestic sphere. The normative literature, as you all know, from antiquity paints an image of a society in which women remained within the domestic sphere, ideally, throughout their lives, leaving all activities in the public arena to their male relatives. And scholarship of the last decades has shown that this biased picture hides a far more complex reality in which women could and did venture out into the public sphere. And Professor Hamelink's book, Hidden Lives and Public Personae from 2015, brings to the fore these women as benefactors, as priestesses, and mothers of collegiae through inscriptional evidence primarily. Professor Hamelink has always been an active agent in furthering and facilitating gender-focused research as well. One example of that is her source book from 2020, which is a valuable contribution to the study of gender in the ancient world, which is called Women and Society in the Roman World, a source book of inscriptions from the Roman West. And many publications, including recent Dutch language publications for a wider audience, have appeared too. And soon, this February, a new publication, which is called Eindelijk Vrij in Dutch, so finally free, will appear on the ambitions, limitations, and potential of freed women within the Roman world. And central to both Hamelink's work and the book today is the aim to study the public lives of women in antiquity. And by public, we mean anything outside the home. This is not to say that what women did inside the home is not interesting, but rather that the public presence and agency of women is the more surprising, given our own gender norms, and challenging on generally expected gender roles, present company, of course, of researchers excluded. And this book is a collection of papers focusing on this issue, asking how women managed to take up public roles in socially accepted ways, and the question of whether they lived in separate worlds to men. And this study, the book in its entirety, spans a vast temporal and geographical scope, covering the period from 500 BCE to 650 CE, and it encompasses a wide range of regions, including case studies from Palmyra, Dura Europos, Palestine, Arabia, the broader Greek world, of course, Asia Minor, Rome itself, Constantinople, and my own contribution, Roman Britain. The focus is thus not limited to Professor Hamelink's specific area of expertise in the Western Mediterranean, but extends to contributions covering the, well, at least a large part, if not the entirety, of the Roman and Greek cultural spheres. About the authors in the book, the prominence of Dutch authors, Dutch academics in this volume reflects its origins as a symposium. Even if Professor Hamelink's work has had a significant international impact. Notably, one of the most valuable outcomes of this project is that scholars who do not typically focus on gender have embraced this perspective here. Contributors were carefully selected from among those with whom Professor Hamelink has enjoyed working, and they were invited to explore a gender perspective within their research. And many enthusiastically took up this challenge, often incorporating a gender-focused approach for the very first time, specifically for this publication. A specific example is the contribution by Professor Van Nijf on women participating as benefactresses in sports in the Greek world. He had never done anything with a gender focus before, but he did so specifically for this volume. And this resulted in many original contributions and has also increased the appreciation and interest in gender perspectives among the Dutch academic community. So we can count that as a win, I think. Thematically, the scope of the book is very varied, as a result as well of people being asked to take a gender focus on their own research. So we get various case studies in which women can be found in religious roles, in sports, in queenship, women taking on political prominence in war times during the Roman civil wars, funerary self-representation, public munificence, and also in private letters. It is a very wide selection of case studies where part of the sources have a very literary focus, and some of them have an entirely visual or epigraphic focus. The contributions thus range from highly visible and public roles of elite women as imperial wives, queens, priestesses, and benefactresses to the more mundane women of the ancient world. For example, the funerary portraits of the women of Dura Europos or from Britain, and the women in letters from Egypt. Yet even the more mundane women who are viewed as part of a family unit, for example, in funerary commemorations where they are depicted and named among their husband and their children, or in correspondence, in private letters, which might be termed, as I say, private, these might not be considered part of their participation in life outside the home. Yet in these letters, or in these public representations of women on funerary portraits, we actually see that they are a part of a wider world and the outside world and are visible. If I can name a specific example, in the letters analyzed by Dr. Sophie Remijsen from the University of Amsterdam, these women aren't just talking about managing the household in their letters. They are consulting oracles, they're managing businesses, they're offering economic advice to relatives. These letters at the same time also reveal gendered patterns of behavior, such as timekeeping practices used by women that relate to pregnancy, yet they also reveal their ability to use more public or male modes of keeping time, such as calendars and clocks, as well as demonstrating that these women knew their way around the bureaucracy of the time, and something as reserved for military and public life as clock time. They showcase that these women were very much in touch with and part of life, and not just in their own domestic gendered world, but using both gendered patterns of behavior as well as doing exactly the same things as men. Now, these sources range from very far removed to very personal. So we see women's own voices in the papyri letters, even if they are written down by a scribe. We see representations in which the women may have had some agency, though determining this is methodologically difficult, except when the inscription mentions that the text or portrait was crafted while they were alive. And it ranges from funerary portraits and commemorative and honorary inscriptions to sources of which the authors were far removed from the lives of the women they describe, such as in the case of Hellenistic, more Oriental queens described by Roman writers. Attempts to pierce through the veil of biased male-authored literary sources is, of course, difficult, and some of the contribution make a very good effort in doing this. These sources, of course, are the basis for much of our historical analysis of women in the ancient world. And it's actually in their confusion that these sources are interesting, their confusion on the roles of women. Roman authors were baffled by the military success and power of the women they describe. Zenobia, for example, or the Saracen queen María, and actually failed to comprehend the cultural political systems that made their position possible as queens. Their confusion, in essence, is thus revealing in their attitudes and perception of women's presence in the public sphere. Highlighting the challenges and sometimes outright problematic availability of sources on women's lives is one aspect of several contributions. This is especially apparent in the discussion of royal women such as Theodora and Maria, for whose lives and influence we have so very few sources. This stands in positive contrast to the more generously available inscriptional, papyrological, and visual sources for women's lives. Though there is often only one such source for any single individual woman, such as a funerary monument or a letter, as a collective corpus, these sources can provide us insight into how women within a particular socioeconomic or cultural community presented themselves in the public sphere and engaged with life outside the home. Or they can illustrate that the home can be very much intertwined with public life. This is exemplified by the contribution by Line Foubert on women staying at home in Rome during the civil wars. This act of women staying at home in Rome during the civil wars made these women guardians of the home, not just as a place where you spin wool, but as a signifier of the family unit, their lineage, their status. And thereby it became a political statement and a very public act to stay, as an ideal wife should, at home. And a traditional opposition between the domus and forum, as a private and public dichotomy, has already been problematized by Professor Hamelink, as she explained that the world of family and friends spilled over into the forum and the world of politics was part of the domus. And in this wartime situation specifically, these women's home, these elite women's home, became political and a place to display courage, loyalty, and to offer financial and legal support to their husbands. They thus became I'm sorry?
Anique, just because you have already 15 minutes after presentation.
I'm almost there, sorry.
No problem. It's just
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
So these women, by staying at home, embodied traditional Republican values and also received equally respectable reception by Roman writers as women who joined their husbands in flight and exile. And it also seems that they had agency in this choice whether to stay or to join their husbands in exile. In conclusion, The Public Lives of Ancient Women is a fitting tribute to Professor Hemelink's important contributions to Roman social history and gender studies. Through diverse and innovative chapters, the book builds on her research into women's public agency while expanding its scope to new regions, periods, and perspectives, and as well new academics studying gender for the very first time. By exploring the many ways ancient women navigated and shaped both public and private spheres, the volume highlights their integral roles in religious, economic, political, and social life. It celebrates Hemelink's legacy and encourages future scholarship to continue unveiling the often overlooked public lives of ancient women. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the interruption.
No problem.
Now we pass to Tais Pagoto Bélo, as you have planned, and after the two presentations, you have the respondents. So please, Tais, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecília, and thank you for the invitation and for everyone who is here. I will share my PowerPoint. Can you see? It's okay? Okay, so I will begin. So good afternoon or good evening. I will talk about my book, The Strength of Roma Women Through Coins and a Feminist Critique from the Past to the Present. This work is the result of two postdocs, one took at the University of São Paulo and the other at Université Livre de Bruxelles, with the support of Brazilian funding agency called FAPESP. And let's see. This is the contents of the work. And this work aims to expose the public image of Roman women such as Fulvia, Octavia, Livia, Agrippina Major, and Agrippina Minor, including the late Republic and early Empire, through coin samples and written sources that exemplify their lives. The objective is to illustrate how these women improved their public image through duties linked to the imperial family, patronage, religion, and imperial propaganda. The major importance of this work is an invitation to a reflection of the perception of the reality of the present through an analytical approach in relation to the improvement conditions of women's studies of antiquity, with a purpose capable of managing conscience and coherence of current feminine factors in contrast to the existence of a variety and the similarity about the woman of the past. In the introduction, demonstrate what is the importance of this work for women's studies, for gender studies, for women history, for understanding of the patriarchy, and it is shown how the feminist movement influenced in academic works. Many books about the study of women in antiquity were cited, but the best-known ones are in the mainstream commercial publishers and mainly in English. The other works ended up not being discussed. And another thing is what to expect from this work. It was shown how women's representations in ancient Rome began in academic work, especially regarding coins. The first chapter, I made a comparison and contrast with the past and present. Some epigraphy and citation were put from some contemporary authors, such as Against Our Will by Susan Brown Miller, and The Transformation of Intimacy by Anthony Giddens. It was demonstrated how women's lives were in the late Republic and early Empire, only to have the first notion. How religions and pudicitia were related to them, how the myths of erosion were linked to the collective conscience, and how rape is very acceptable to explain the beginning of Roman state. A comparison from the Roman patriarchy and the current patriarchy was debated, and it was realized that the Roman patriarchy was a structured one, and it had three pillars based on the religious discourse, which influenced the familiar and education discourse, the historical discourse, considering the myths of origin, such as the rape of Rhea Silva, the Sabines abduction, the rape of Lucretia and Virginia, and the legal discourse that was based on the religiosity and historical experience. A great work that was very used by me is The Masculine Domination by Bourdieu, who defines symbolic violence as a soft violence, imperceptible and invisible even to victims, exercised largely through purely symbolic channels and communication and cognition with regard to gender. its understanding as symbolical violence can be exemplified by the fact that the dominated assume the categories of the dominant as natural. This position of dominated one was very useful to interpret women from Roman elite. Chapter 3, 2, it was a conceptualized what was patronage and how women used it in their favor. And the work of Emily Hamelink was very used. Portraiture of their own image had a close connection with patronage when the demand for public affairs for imperial and non-imperial women increased. Women who donate funds for public buildings, public festivals, and games receive as a reward a portrait of themselves in a prominent place in the city. And the other part of this chapter is about coins and propaganda. Little Roman women were part of imperial propaganda, which included their own image on coins, which was a way of demonstrating power. Since there is no doubt that the Romans used symbols, captions, and images on coins to promote political ideas, social and religious events, and military or economic messages. Chapter 3, I started to talk about women. And first of all is Fulvia, the first that was minted in coins. She was married to Mark Antony in the first phase of the second triumvirate. She was called the bloodthirsty by Cicero for having been linked to Mark Antony's plots, such as the decimation of the fourth and Mars' allegiance. She was also present in the proscription when she took Cicero's head and pinned it. In the Perusian War against Octavius, she went with her children, armed herself, and proclaimed military orders. In coins, Fulvia appears as the personification of Victoria Anique, and in one of Eumenea's coins, Athena is in the reverse. Fulvia's actions are pertinent to the representations of Victoria Anique and Athena. Athena on Fulvia's coins may mark her warlike leadership, which would bring in her conceptions a dubious appearance, feminine and masculine, demonstrating Fulvia's strength, determination, and power against Octavius. Fulvia's representation on coins are distinguished from other women, such as Livia, who was always linked to the deities that characterized the matron, the wife and mother. Chapter 4, it was about Octavia, the ideal Roman matron. She was Octavia's older sister. Her second marriage was with Mark Antony, raising 10 more children, but only 5 were her. The others were close relatives who could be successors of Octavius. She was Claudius' grandmother, Caligula's great-grandmother. And Octavia's coins, they were minted only during Antony's lifetime. In the Eastern Greece, it was minted to honor the union of Mark Antony and Octavia. She married Antonio only to fulfill a political negotiation alliance with of her brother. She never tried to obtain a public position of power. She did what was expected of a woman from the imperial family. Her marriage to Antony made her suffer humiliation due to the debasement of her husband and the exploitation of her brother so that he could promote a civil war. Women like Octavia were used as objects in the social construction of Rome. In addition to being linked to kinship relations, marriage, and mainly dynastic continuity, which define these women as a social status and objects of exchange between families, destined to contribute to male continuity and success. They were symbolic instruments of male politics, reduced to the condition of instruments of production and reproduction of symbolic and social capital. They were victims of symbolic violence, which also legitimized them as chaste women linked to pudicitia. Chapter 5 is about Livia Drusilla. She was the wife of Augustus. She had been married to Tiberius Claudius Nero, with whom she had Tiberius and Drusus. She had no children with Augustus. She belonged to the gens Claudi, and she helped Octavius to strengthen his ties with distinguished families in Rome. Livia was the best represented woman from the Julio Claudius family. Her name appeared in ports, markets, sanctuaries, and on coins, special because of patronage. Augustus combined Livia's need to show herself with traditional gifts and power with the domus, with her role linked to the matters of states. The affairs of family and states were inextricably linked. The public and the private. She had a dubious position, a dubious role, but no public position. Public role, but no public position. Her position became more ambiguous during the government of Tiberius due to the titles of Augusta, Mater Patriae, and because she acquired privilege that only the Vestal virgins had. Livia acted in the public sphere. Was according to the Roman feminine ideal. The public activities chosen for Livia were linked to the religion space. The restoration of the sanctuary of Bonadea highlights Livia's connection with Vestal rituals. Augustus granted her the title of Sacrosanctus in 36 BC. She appeared on coins through the and prosperity, such as Ceres, Demeter, Vesta, Hestia, Juno, Hera. And I put the first figure, it's Vesta, and you can see how it's similar with the coins of Livia. What is realized is that Livia had to be associated with religious activities to maintain an aspect linked to pudicitia. This confirms an attempt at control and limit by the state and by the empire regarding women's actions. With the agency of Livia, there must have been an indirect reconceptualization of space, with new limits and new circumstances, in which the public had to be reorganized as a result of a privated one, a woman, Livia. This does not mean that male domination has ceased to act on female domination, but it has been renewed in such a way that the actions of these women with a new position are part of a new order that's still in the detriment of men. Livia's agency has shown that the space could be much more diverse and complex than we think. Chapter 6 is about Agrippina Major, who was born of Julia, daughter of Augustus. She married to Germanicus, son of Drusus, adopted by Tiberius. They had 9 children, of whom only 6 survived, such as Caligula and Agrippina Minor. Agrippina saved the Roman soldiers by trying not to destroy a bridge in Cassa Vetera. Germanicus went to the east, where he was poisoned. Then she was exiled by Tiberius and died of hunger. Then Caligula honored her in coins.
Tais, just the time ended, so please, 1 or 2 minutes more.
Okay, I will finish with a conclusion that I made about Agrippina Major and Agrippina Minor together, and then the last conclusion of everything. Women of Roman elite, such as Agrippina Minor and even her mother, Agrippina Major, took extremely care in order to have a career as imperial women. These women were the privileged victims of symbolic domination, and they were the appropriate instruments that could be capable of modifying its effects. But they were also fundamental in making their own husbands, brothers, and sons emperors. In other words, they contribute to the imperative dissemination in their favor, especially in the face of circumstantial symbolic power, to guarantee a position within this system, which brought an apparent freedom, which aimed to obtain from them a diligent submission and a contribution to male domination. It was realized that the position of Roman women was something problematic. In the end of the conclusion, I made a comparison from past to the present regarding women's position. According to Pesquisa FAPESP magazine, even though women academics are already making up a large part of scientific community, surpassing men in the number of PhDs defended per year in Brazil, they are still at a disadvantage when it comes to occupying positions of greater power at universities, research institutes, and funding agencies. The gender of authors from 15 countries was analyzed in the Scopus database between 2014 and 2018 through the report entitled The Research Journey Through the Gender Lens, published by Elsevier on 15 March 2012. Brazil appears among the most equitable, with 0.8 women per man compared to 0.55 in the period of 1999 and 2003, surpassing Portugal with 0.9 and Argentina just over 1 woman per man. Ahead of United Kingdom, 0.6, the United States and Germany 0.5. However, even though the presence of women in science today is driven by their high participation, the places of power are still delimited because while men win higher paid positions, women remain in the less prestigious one. It should be emphasized that the Roman female position proves to be an important instructive resource to be explored, to raise awareness of current male and female agencies. In this perspective, the position of Roman woman offers a counterpart to think about the woman of the present, which is very much guided by abuse, physical and symbolic violence, and even feminicides. Therefore, the critique of Roman patriarchy is also a consciential and educational resource for questioning gender agencies and their identities in contemporary times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obrigada, Tais. Well, now I pass the word, I give the word to Professor Rosa, please, to comment the first book. Rosa, sorry, please, your microphone. Thank you. Gracias, disculpe.
Buenas tardes, bonjour. Estamos teniendo un pequeño problema en este momento para cargar el PowerPoint, entonces esperamos solucionarlo.
Sí.
In this moment,
I'm not able to upload a document from my computer.
Perhaps.
Yes.
Okay. Can you manage? Thank you.
Entonces, espera un momentín, presentación.
¿Lo pueden ver?
¿Lo puede? Sí, sin problema. Entonces, lo que pasa de sitio actual, no puede, esto sí que es lo que no, desde el comienzo. No, está parado ahora.
Bueno, pero eso tendrás aquí para habilitar, a ver, unos botones.
Espera, a ver. Documentos, aplicación.
Sí, pero Rosa,
Sí.
podemos continuar. Caio puede presentar y tú hablas, qué bien, ¿puede ser?
Puede ser, perfectamente. Thanks. Thanks. Buenas tardes. Mi intervención tiene que ver con el libro del que ya se ha hablado, de Lucinda Dirben, Martin Hicks, Sophie Bergstein, sobre The Public Lives of Ancient Women. Y en este sentido quiero aclarar que voy a formular algunas preguntas sobre el contenido del libro y están marcadas en color rojo en el PowerPoint que yo voy a proyectar. Este libro se plantea, por favor, ¿se puede pasar a la siguiente diapositiva?
¿No se ha cambiado?
No.
A ver, un momento. ¿Ahora sí?
Sí.
Vale.
Este libro es un homenaje a la profesora Emilie Himmelreich y presenta una introducción, realmente es breve pero muy interesante. En la introducción se habla de cómo se organizan los capítulos y de cómo se justifica la elección de los temas que componen esta obra. Se alude a las circunstancias de esta publicación, ya que se tuvo que llevar a cabo por la imposibilidad de celebrar un encuentro académico debido a las circunstancias de la COVID. El interés de esta obra radica en resaltar la influencia de la profesora Himmelreich en el estudio histórico de las mujeres de la antigüedad. Sobre todo se resalta su análisis de las fuentes del pasado, cómo estudia las fuentes del pasado, tanto las literarias como las iconográficas y las epigráficas. Para mí es especialmente relevante. Y también el hecho de que la profesora Himmelreich siempre tuvo un gran afán, un gran interés en reconocer a las romanas, a las mujeres romanas y a las mujeres de la antigüedad más allá de los ambientes domésticos. Por ello, merece la pena reflexionar brevemente sobre el trabajo de Himmelreich, de la profesora Emilie Himmelreich, que he de destacar su listado bibliográfico se incorpora en este libro, ocupa varias páginas, ¿no? A continuación, yo quiero valorar algunos trabajos que me parecen fundamentales de la obra de esta profesora, ¿no? Empiezo por Matrona Docta, Educar las mujeres, que es un libro fundamental publicado en el año 1999, donde se da cuenta del papel que tuvieron las mujeres de la élite porque eran educadas y recompone además y saca a la luz mujeres cuya vida intelectual desconocíamos. También es relevante su obra sobre las mujeres en la ciudad romana, en el occidente latino, porque aquí reflexiona junto con la autora Green Wolf sobre la preeminencia pública de las mujeres a partir del análisis epigráfico e iconográfico. Se centra en el occidente, ¿no? Creo que son especialmente relevantes las dos obras que voy a señalar a continuación, ¿no? Hidden Lives, Public Person. Porque aquí la profesora que hace esta obra en solitario, es una obra ya individual, analiza la presencia de las mujeres en las prácticas, a través de las prácticas evergéticas, y insiste en un aspecto desde mi punto de vista fundamental. Las mujeres que aparecen en esa documentación epigráfica que ella analiza pretenden ante todo su propia representación, su propia exhibición. Hay lo que se llama una práctica de autorrepresentación, self-representation. Y procuran también una promoción social que es propia, que no solamente la de su familia o la de sus parientes masculinos. Revisa entonces la tesis de que, anclada en el pasado, de que las mujeres de la élite promocionaban actos públicos o actuaciones públicas para defender fundamentalmente intereses de su familia o las carreras de sus parientes masculinos. Es decir, que ella revisa, reflexiona sobre esta cuestión. Es llamativo el uso del amplio número de testimonios, sobre todo epigráficos, es muy sorprendente. Y he de señalar que la profesora española Cándida Martínez está trabajando también en esta misma línea, a través de un análisis de monumentos epigráficos. Por favor, la siguiente filmina, ¿no? La última obra que nos ha legado la profesora Hamelink tiene que ver con las mujeres y la sociedad en el mundo romano, y tiene especial interés porque en este caso la profesora Emily se aproxima a otras mujeres que son de condición más humilde. Habla de los oficios de las mujeres como las nodrizas, las comadronas o las prostitutas, entre otras. Intenta reconstruir cómo era la vida cotidiana de estas mujeres, cómo viajaron, cómo participaron en procesos migratorios y cómo era su vida en la familia, entre otros tópicos. Es un cambio, de alguna forma, de un protagonista femenino, unas protagonistas femeninas de la élite a mujeres que pertenecen a otro sector social. Desde mi punto de vista, Emily Hamelink, su trabajo representa una historia de las mujeres que insiste en lo que hicieron las mujeres, en los hechos de las mujeres, tanto en la vida pública y sobre todo en la vida pública y en los ambientes urbanos. Sus tesis siempre se basan en un amplio volumen de documentación, siempre, ¿no? Y combina además testimonios de índole variada, ¿no? Epigrafía, literatura, iconografía, que ella compara, también contrasta. Es capaz de ver, como no, con mucha claridad, la misoginia que se detecta en los trabajos literarios y que no puede ser nunca la única fuente cuando la utilizamos para construir biografías de mujeres poderosas, sobre todo la familia imperial. La información de esta literatura, de estos autores grecolatinos, nos ha enseñado Hamelink, requiere un análisis especial, ¿no? Por ejemplo, pensemos cómo es la Libia construida por Tácito, si la comparamos con las imágenes que se proyectan en la propaganda augustea o de sus sucesores en las esculturas o en los tributos que le dedican los provinciales. Finalmente, Hamelink presenta una investigación, para mí es muy importante, de lo que es una historia social. Insiste menos en lo cultural. Está interesada en las mujeres, en qué hicieron las mujeres y el alcance de esa agencia en el desarrollo de la historia, ¿no? Entonces, lo ha hecho y nos muestra cómo se puede hacer ese estudio de las mujeres de la antigüedad. En este trabajo, que ahora que se ha analizado ya, quiero destacar que se cubre un amplio marco territorial y cronológico. Se cubre desde el año 500 a.C. hasta el año 600 después de Cristo. Y un territorio que no se circunscribe al Mediterráneo, ya que también aparecen mujeres sirias, como Zenobia de Palmira, o mujeres de condición más humilde en Dura Europos, ¿no? entre otros. Por favor, la siguiente. El libro se compone de 13 capítulos donde se revisa la influencia social de las mujeres. El centro siempre son las mujeres, más que el género, a partir de estudios como el poder y las mujeres poderosas, la religión, el deporte, las letras que escribieron mujeres del Egipto greco-romano, las aristócratas en las guerras civiles, las novedades que nos ofrece la epigrafía si queremos aportar temas nuevos sobre las mujeres de la antigüedad, y finalmente el libro finaliza con un análisis sobre las prácticas energéticas femeninas en el cristianismo primitivo que están emulando lo que hacían las antiguas paganas. Sobre las poderosas mujeres y el poder femenino, pues se habla en los capítulos 1 al 4 y hay datos muy interesantes sobre las reinas helenísticas y su papel en la guerra. Lo que se observa igualmente, esa actividad bélica, se observa en el caso de Zenobia y la reina saracea Mavia, ¿no? Que son ejemplos de las reinas orientales. Esto se trata en los capítulos 1 y 2. Se enfatiza el caso de las mujeres severas y cómo han sido vistas por la literatura antigua, viéndolas como participantes de los errores y de los desastres que acompañaron el reinado de los últimos severos, ¿no? De Heliogábalo y Calígula, ¿no? Se insiste en esa imagen de mujeres que transgreden el comportamiento, que son transgresoras en su comportamiento sexual, aunque posiblemente aquí haya también elementos míticos, ¿no? Finalmente, estas mujeres y el poder acaba con Teodora y sobre todo se resalta su actuación en el episodio de la revuelta de Nica, ¿no? Que fue crucial para estabilizar la posición de Justiniano, ¿no? Se habla de las controversias que marcan la reconstrucción de la biografía de esta emperatriz, que llegó a ser santa en la Iglesia Ortodoxa. Esto se trata en el capítulo 4. En estas biografías de las mujeres, de mujeres que están en el poder, ¿no?, quisiera llamar la atención sobre mujeres que viven o cuyas vidas transcurrieron en sistemas dinásticos, están en la cima del poder en sistemas dinásticos. Por lo tanto, su relevancia tiene que ver con el hecho de legitimar la sucesión, el papel del heredero, que siempre era masculino. Todas las personas que desfilan aquí son importantes, aunque su agencia, su capacidad de acción sobrepasa este papel que puede ser simplemente el de alumbrar al heredero, ¿no? En este sentido, la alusión a Livia y a los Julio Claudias yo creo que se ha olvidado en el libro, pero porque de alguna manera se ha insistido más en el caso de las mujeres helenísticas y cómo pueden estas mujeres helenísticas reproducirse en la actuación y en las biografías de las severas. Mi pregunta es, yo quizá podíamos reflexionar sobre si las severas realmente representan el modelo de esas reinas helenísticas, o se parecen más bien a las Julio Claudias. Es decir, yo haría esta pregunta sin cuestionar el interés del capítulo que se dedica, de los capítulos que se dedican a esta cuestión. En el caso de la religión, hay una interpretación muy interesante de una inscripción problemática, la que está en el Hecatopedón, y lo interesante de la aportación del capítulo 5 es que nos aproxima a una sacerdotisa cuya labor tenía que ver con preservar el tesoro de Atenas. Una mujer estaba llevando a cabo actividades que podían ser actividades de los varones. Es muy interesante, desde mi punto de vista también, cómo se interpreta Bacanalia, porque se examinan los textos de Livio, la transgresión de estas mujeres que participan en Bacanalia, y se compara con el texto de Eurípides, ¿no? Del que Tito Livio está recuperando imágenes o datos de Eurípides, lo mismo que hace Tácito cuando confecciona una biografía de Mesalina, ¿no? Lo sorprendente es que la autora habla de una mujer que fue sacerdotisa de Baco, no 4 siglos después, casi en el siglo II después de Cristo. Bacanalia sucede en el siglo II antes de Cristo, recuerdo, y en esta centuria posterior a Cristo el culto de Baco llega a ser oficial. Entonces es una sacerdotisa de un culto oficial que había sido perseguido y que fue perseguido durante centurias, ¿no? Entonces se habla de la integración del culto en este capítulo, y yo digo si esta integración fue debida a que del culto báquico se eliminó, ¿no?, todo aquello que suponía transgresión o disturbios, elementos que ponían en cuestión, que transgredían las normas romanas, ¿no? Me refiero, por ejemplo, posiblemente a la eliminación de las danzas, de las prácticas orgiásticas, de la ingesta de vino, del hecho de que se hubiese nocturnidad, aunque posiblemente no fuera tan relevante ya que se mezclasen hombres y mujeres. Otros temas también están muy presentes y creo que han sido muy atendidos por los historiadores y por las historiadoras ya durante décadas, en el pasado siglo XX, ¿no?, que van a ser las guerras civiles. Pero antes me gustaría destacar la novedad de hablar de las mujeres que participan en competiciones atléticas, que algunas tienen una proyección pública, que son mujeres de la élite y que no son solo mujeres espartanas, ¿no? Entonces hay también una actividad gimnástica que no tenemos muy en cuenta y que se tiene en cuenta aquí a partir del análisis de las fuentes. Sin olvidar, y además participan en competiciones panhelénicas, ¿no?, es lo relevante. No me olvido de un pequeño capítulo, pero muy interesante también, que es un análisis de las cartas escritas sobre papiro localizadas en Egipto, donde se habla de cómo se organiza el tiempo, la vida cotidiana, las biografías de ellos y sobre todo de ellas, y el papel del parto a la hora de marcar las biografías y los tiempos de las mujeres, ¿no? La carrera política es para ellos y la vida maternal, el parto, el embarazo, marca la vida de ellas. Y ya voy acabando.
Rosa, así, no tenemos mucho tiempo más.
Voy
Entonces,
acabando ya. Sí,
gracias.
decir que
Disculpe.
en el capítulo, al final, el capítulo 9, tiene que ver con las mujeres y las guerras civiles. Se habla de, de las escasas referencias de los autores grecolatinos a esa participación femenina cuando sabemos hoy que las mujeres están involucradas en las guerras civiles. Mi pregunta es cómo se puede entender un episodio como el de Bruto, cuando está en Filipos, sin tener o disfrutar de la ayuda que estaba organizando Servilia en su casa en la Domus de Roma, a pesar de que las fuentes no enfaticen esta situación. Y luego, quizá como un tributo ya muy especial a la profesora Hamelink, voy finalizando, hay 3 capítulos que se dedican a una vida, al análisis de la epigrafía y que muestran muchas novedades, ¿no? Es muy interesante el análisis de Licinia Flavia y cómo esta mujer exalta su genealogía familiar en los monumentos funerarios, su familia a quien pertenece, mientras que sus parientes masculinos exaltan en esos monumentos funerarios lo que le sucede en su carrera pública y militar, ¿no? Entonces, mi pregunta es, ¿Licinia Flavia, al no tener una carrera política, tiene que limitarse a honrar a su familia y las bondades y el privilegio de su familia? ¿Tiene otra opción esta mujer? Esa sería mi pregunta. Y ya me falta muy poquito, acabo ya. Es muy interesante el estudio de las iconografías funerarias encontradas en Britania, porque revela, estamos en Britania y hay muchas imágenes de mujeres en banquetes, incluso de mujeres que están solas, ¿no? Entonces aquí, por un lado, puede ser una costumbre romana, pero por otro lado hay como una inversión de roles porque el banquete siempre se consideró una actividad eminentemente masculina. Llegamos a los últimos capítulos, de interés también porque en el yacimiento de Dura Europos, que han excavado por Rostocev, aquí aparecen mujeres y las mujeres frente a los varones preservan su onomástica siria, están como más ligadas a una sociedad más antigua, ¿no? Mientras que ellos se helenizan, incluso se romanizan, a través de la epigrafía. Y se cierra este amplio elenco, esta visión muy amplia de las mujeres, con esas cristianas que están imitando la práctica vergética de las romanas. Yo pienso que este capítulo nos hace ver cómo paganas y cristianas buscaban ese reconocimiento social a través de prácticas energéticas. El libro, sin duda alguna, es muy estimulante para aprender, para saber cómo podemos aproximarnos a las mujeres, por el uso variado de las fuentes que se entrecruzan y porque presenta mujeres que no solamente son las matronas, las privilegiadas, en situaciones muy distintas, para mostrarnos esa relevancia social, esa prominencia social, sino que se acerca también a otras mujeres del territorio provincial que no tuvieran a lo mejor tanto poder o su poder era local. Sobre todo tiene un gran mérito este libro porque nos presenta a las mujeres actuando fuera de la domus y por tanto no asumiendo ese papel de domicedae que tanto los autores antiguos les gustaba resaltar y les gustaba adjudicar a las mujeres. Ciertamente debo decir que no todas las mujeres todas las mujeres romanas tuvieron ese reconocimiento público y la profesora Emily Hamelink en su último libro trata esta cuestión, ¿no? Pero de haber hablado de otras mujeres que no fuesen las que tienen ese reconocimiento público, se hubiese necesitado otro libro. Muchísimas gracias a las autoras de este libro. Pido perdón por mi inglés escrito y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Rosa, por esta lectura tan atenta. Gracias. Agora, now I give the floor, the screen to Professor Filippo, Carlà-Uhink. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Grazie.
Can you hear me well? Yes. So thank you so much. I will go with English because I loved listening now the Spanish talk, but my Spanish is too bad to reply in Spanish myself. So Sorry for that. I thought that having to discuss and to respond to Tais' book on women and Roman coins, I thought that since I have only 10 minutes and it was told to me that I shouldn't review the book, but just, take some aspects and discuss about them, I thought I would use this very short time to talk about where I think that we can move forward from what's the actual state of the art about the study of gender and numismatics, which is a field in which quite a lot has been written lately. Tais' book is the newest one in a series that has been produced in the past, let's say, 20 years, which is very relevant, especially concentrating on the representation of women on coins, both on Greek and Roman coins, and on discussing on how women represented on the iconographies, but also on why some women are represented on coins and some are not. For instance, discussing the connection with legitimacy, with the existence of children in the case of Roman empresses, on the title of EuGeSta, whether it has been given to these empresses or not, and a lot of attention has been dedicated, for instance, on the big question on why the empresses of the Tetrarchy and the further empresses of the 3rd century have not been represented on coins, which is much later than the chronology that Tais has chosen to investigate on her book. And on this we have very interesting books. I just wanted to reference 3 which have very much characterized, as I said, the past 20 years of scholarship. Exactly 20 years ago, in 2004, Annette Alexandridis published a beautiful Die Frauen des römischen Kaiserhauses, eine Untersuchung ihrer bildlichen Darstellungen von Livia bis Julia Domna, which was not only concentrating on coins, but also on other sculptures. And it was followed 2 years later by another German book that I really like to mention because it's Vergöttlicht oder verdammt, römische Kaiserfrauen im Spiegel der Münzen, edited by Friedrich Burrer and Rosemarie Günther. This is a book I really like to quote. It's not very known, but it's the result of a project done at the University of Mannheim with students, where students have worked on Roman coins representing women, have organized a small exhibition, and have reflected on their activity. So I think it's really important, especially when we think of how we can translate this research we are doing into teaching and also, of course, into outreach and into impact, which is also what Tais was doing with her book, with drawing back to contemporary issues and to contemporary female condition, starting from Antiquity. And I think teaching is the key to all of that, and it's important that we reflect on that. And the last text I would like to mention is Lisbeth Kleiss's Kinship and Coins, Ancestors and Family in Roman Imperial Coinage under the Principate, 2013, which is also a very relevant publication in this sense. But maybe I wonder if we're not often too biographical when we discuss women on coins, and especially on Roman coins. We always start from the biography of the individual empress or the individual emperor or the individual woman, and we think, okay, why did she deserve being on coins, or why was she particularly powerful, rather than looking in a more general and systemic way into how power is performed and represented in the Roman Empire, and especially in connection with other forms of representation. I think we should always remember that what we have on the coins is a part of a much broader picture of representation that was done of statues, was done of public performances, was done of speeches, was done of a lot of other things that we do not see anymore because they're lost to us, and coins were embedded in a much broader network, which I think we should always try to consider a bit. Theodora II has been mentioned by Rosa earlier. Everyone who knows me knows that I have particular passion for Theodora, Justinian's wife, and we don't have coins of her. But this doesn't mean that she wasn't important or that she wasn't powerful, because we know that on the other hand, she was extremely important and powerful for Justinian, and she's also mentioned in Justinian's laws, and also the lack of empresses from the tetrarchy coinage. Diocletian's wife is in no coins, has been understood for a long time as a kind of neglect of the female imperial figure by the tetrarchy, and I hope I've shown last year in a publication that I brought out that that's not the case. It's just that we have a different system of imperial performance and of imperial representation. So I think that we have some steps that we could take. One step that I think would be maybe interesting is I still think that literature on gender on coins is very much working with a feminist approach, which is very important and very useful, but maybe we could try to add a queer theory approach to the study of ancient coins and try to see if that leads us somewhere else, which is something that I started doing with an article a couple of years ago about the transgender elements on ancient coinage, and I hope that this can be maybe taken forward and will also help into looking back again at the representation of women on coins, and this is one aspect. The second aspect is that I think that we should consider always, yes, the iconographic aspects. So why do we have these women there and how are they represented? What's the iconography? But we shouldn't ever forget that those are coins. So these are objects which are produced first and foremost to be a means of payment and the presence of imperial authority and power in everyday life, yes, but this authority is not a generic authority. It's the authority of the power that assures you that that coin has that economic value, and that you can exchange that coin for a certain amount of, objects, products, and so on and so forth. So again, then the presence of the female figure on these coins is also a way of guaranteeing the economic value of the object. And this is something that has been, I think until now, yes, not very much researched. Again, I tried doing something last year on that, but I think we have to shift very much our concept of authority onto the authority which is legitimizing not only the power, but is also legitimizing, as I said, the economic value, which is crucial to these small round objects. Another element that I think is very interesting and very important is the one about chronology and geography. Tais has started with Fulvia and Octavia, which are indeed the first Roman women that we find on coins, which means that we find women on Roman coins not much later than we find men, because also the first representations of living men on Roman coins are not much earlier than ones of women, and that's something that maybe we should stress more. But the geographic aspect is important because these are first and foremost coins minted in the East and provincial coins, which therefore must be understood, again, in connection with Hellenistic forms of royal power and representation, and especially if we think of Ptolemaic coinage of Ptolemy II and Arsinoe II, representing, by the way, also Ptolemy I and Berenice I on their coins, we have iconographies that come again very much, for instance, in the coins of Octavia. And I think that the two last points that I mentioned, the economic aspect and the geographical aspect, should be put together because we also tend to study coins from catalogs. I did it myself. Everybody does it, saying, oh, there is this coin type, but we don't look and check where have these coins been found, where were they circulating. And this is especially important for provincial coinage, which was not circulating in Rome, was not circulating in Italy. So where were these female figures representing some specific form of authority through the fact that these coins were accepted as a means of payment in these particular regions? And the last point I have is the one of agency, because of course, when we see a woman on Roman imperial coinage, we think in terms of strength, we think in terms of authority, we think in terms of a woman who is gone out of her way, let's say, with a virginity and so on and so forth. But the point is, who chose to put that portrait of a woman on a coin? Probably a man. Because we don't know much about who was choosing the iconographies to be put on coinage, but we don't have any elements to think that there was a female agency in that. So the representation of women on Roman coins, is it an emic or is it an etic representation? how much of these portraits of women are actually a male discourse on women, even when it is representing some specifically strong and powerful kinds of women. So do these coins really break muted group theory application, let's say, when we study the representation of women in the ancient world? Because I fear they do not. So I guess, but my main point is that we have a lot of interesting work which has been done and which we can use to start for our next generation of work on these topics, where I hope that we will be embedding coins, as I said, in much broader contexts, communication contexts, social contexts, but also economic contexts that we can reconstruct only in part, but are much bigger and imply also different representations of gender and hierarchies. I would like to conclude with a quote by Peter Keegan. Peter Keegan wrote a chapter on Fulvia in the book that Maria Cecília mentioned in the beginning that I edited in 2020, the one on Orientalism and the representation of powerful women. And he wrote the chapter on Fulvia, and he writes in his conclusion, and I quote, "In many ways, then, we're left with the familiar mystery of historical female experience mediated through the gendered rhetoric of masculinist Orientalist interpreters. Not necessarily the most satisfying of conclusions, but in the end, a necessary exploration of the discursive practices which colonize the lived realities of real women in ancient and modern times, and which must constantly be exposed." And this is the perspective from which I would like myself and all the colleagues and Tais to investigate Roman coins and female figures on Roman coins in the nearest future. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Filippo, for your comments. And now we have 13 minutes. It's not too much, but I would like first to give the floor to Anique to comment on the comments by Rosa, and after to Tais. So Anique, please.
Thank you so much. I was able to understand even some of the Spanish, which I am happy to conclude for myself. Thank you so much for your review of the book, which was very thorough and covered most of the chapters. I actually, because you showed us the text in red as the aspects which you thought were either interesting to further explore, you have some questions, or you have some ideas on what could be alternative explanations. And I think I'm looking for what I wrote down on this. Oh, I see, I didn't get that slide. Do we perhaps have the slides? Because there was one that I wanted to screenshot, but I didn't manage to do so. Let's see. Did I? Oh no, I think I do have it here.
Vale, muy bien.
Yes, I wanted to ask on the slides on the Civil War. So I think that is 2 slides further. Yes, this one. Yeah, yeah, this one. So you mentioned that you say, how do we understand the work of Brutus outside Rome and immersed in the Civil War without taking into account the work that his mother Servilia was doing in the Domus? And then should the text of the Greco-Latin authors also be analyzed for what they do not tell or do not want to tell? I wondered if you could explain that a little bit more, because I'm not sure I completely understood.
Luego, si quieres, me lo traduces. Anis, quisiera plantear, luego hay una traducción al inglés, que los autores como Appiano que hablan del siglo I antes de Cristo y de la participación femenina en las guerras civiles, la información que proporcionan debemos leerla no de manera literal, sino intentar cotejarla, comprobarla e ir más allá de lo que pueden contar, porque tienen intereses en ocultar lo que hicieron las mujeres. La pregunta es, tenemos que ser capaces, desde la historia de las mujeres, de descubrir o ver lo que están ocultando o minimizando estos autores. Esa sería la cuestión que te va a plantear María. Es una reflexión.
Okay, Rosa is proposing a reflection about the women's paper, that if you think that we have to read the sources directly, or suspecting that some is being hidden about the women agency, or that, what do you think about that?
Si está de acuerdo ella.
Are you agree?
Well, I'm very much in agreement with the idea that we should try to investigate what we do not see, which is something I've done in my own dissertation. Like the absence of Roman clothing, both for women and for men, is just as interesting as its presence, I think. So is that what you mean? But then in this context?
Just a minute.
Es una reflexión compartida.
Yes, because Rosa is telling me that it's a self-reflection, you know, that she's agree with what you have been exposing, and she's totally agree. ¿Estás de acuerdo de que se ha ido investigando y que es importante?
So even if they do not get credit in the sources, we should assume, based on several case studies that are much clearer about that their view on what these women did, staying at home, like Cecília, and performing an important function, was actually understood as important in a general sense, even if it is not mentioned. Is that what you're saying?
Sí, que sí, te estás refiriendo que a veces como que hay que ser críticos con las fuentes, pero que a veces incluso lo que no mencionan no quita relevancia.
Totalmente, ¿no? Totalmente.
Okay. We understand each other. Thank you so much for clearing that up. I wasn't exactly sure if I understood correctly. Thank you so much. That I would say that was the only thing I really wanted to ask.
Yes.
Plantear otra cuestión.
Sí, hay otra cuestión, ¿no?
Sí, esta. No hay más esta.
Okay, Rosa has just another question that you can read. The second, can we value this type of in the screen? Don't you see the second question?
Yeah, can we value this type of testimony? So that is a question. Yeah, let me just read it again. So is the question if it is still a form of striving for self-promotion by Liciniia, even if she doesn't have a public career? Is that the question?
Yes. Si está de acuerdo.
Well, I think that defines, if we consider seeking honor in a very male-dominated way as being defined by having a public career, is the only way to get honor. I think there are other forms of gaining recognition for your status outside of a public career, whether that is in politics, which is impossible for most women, or in priesthoods, for example, which is more accessible. Is that going in the right direction?
Pero las mujeres no tienen carrera es que no me atrevo a decir, de fan. Las mujeres no tienen carrera pública, sus su prestigio tiene que ver con su familia. Es decir, hay una cuestión importante. Las mujeres no defienden solo los intereses de su familia cuando aparecen en homenajes públicos. Es que su prestigio radica precisamente en la familia, en esa familia a la que pertenecen. Entonces, yo creo que hay una diferencia importante.
So Rosa is telling that it's a great difference between the ways in which the masculine gets this public recognition, because as you said, they have the public recognition, but in the case of the women, they have to gain through their families. So do you know what I mean?
Well, what about the women who are mothers of collegiae, the women who are priestesses? Can we not see that as a slightly different form of public career?
El caso de las sacerdotisas,
Sí, que
dicho,
es
¿no?
otra
Es
forma de
singular.
reconocimiento
Sí,
público.
sí, de acuerdo. Las sacerdotisas son casos también especiales, singulares. El sacerdocio femenino público tiene también una consideración especial. De acuerdo, de acuerdo. Entonces, dos preguntas más, y no tengo que mirarlo, es si las severas imitan a las Julio Claudias o imitan o tienen más influencias orientales. Otra pregunta, another question.
Okay, another question. Pero la tiene aquí, que prefiero que la tiene.
Ah, vale, sí,
Sí.
antes.
In the previous display, we have another question. Could you display it?
No, bueno, esto tiene que ver con bacanalia. Bueno, puedo responder a esta si quieres. Esta.
Here it is. So, es la última. The last question, thank you, Anique, is, are you reading the text? Yes.
I am.
It's complicated.
I'm not sure I can answer this question specifically. I think the author of the chapter has to answer this question. Who is unfortunately not.
Excuse me, perhaps, sorry, interrupt, but perhaps because of the time to finish, we are already in an extension. Perhaps you could now give the word to Tais to answer Filippo. And ¿podemos, Rosa? Sí, está bien. Gracias, disculpe, pero ya estamos con el tiempo un poco se esgotando y es un asunto que tiene mucho que hablar, pero en el futuro podemos continuar en otro momento también. So, Tais?
Yeah, I have to thank for the observations of Professor Filippo. I'm very glad. And I have some things that I have to explain because, I realized that Professor Filippo is linked to numismatics studies, what it's very good for this work. And first of all, it's my first work in numismatics. First of all, about the transgender and queer thing, for this work, I didn't think that it was necessary or something that would help me theoretically, especially in this moment. But I think it's very important for gender studies, and I incentivize which one who has to carry on with queer, and especially in coins, queer and transgender in coins. So it's for me, I think it's a very good theme of work. And regarding iconography and about the coins and who wanted to make the coins. I put it, I think it's very clear, and in my explanation, I talk about it, and I talk that this iconography is something idealized by state and empire, and it's how this authority wanted or see this kind of women. So I think this is something that I focus a lot. And the third thing, I will be very fast about chronology and geology. I know that it's very important, but in the beginning of my work, I will not do the traditional work of numismatic because I don't want it. I don't want to make something that scholars made it before. But all the chronology and where it was minted or found, it was put in each of the coins. So it's in the citation of each coin. So I think I was very I did very important to put all the information from each coins in my work. And about agency, when I talk about agency in my work, it was legitimately the agency from women. And I know the agency of male discourse was different. And because of this, I had a bit of a bibliography of masculine theory to study about how man works facing women agency. So I think it's very exposed, and if I was not, I had the intention. So it is it. So I'm thank you for being here to show my work and to receive these observations, and I will try to be better.
No, thank you. I don't want to be misunderstood. I wanted to say what we can, as scholars,
Yes.
do next,
Okay.
what is still
Yeah.
open for research, that we are not done researching these topics. That was my main point. Let me just say, just very quickly, with agency, yes, I followed, of course, I read your book, I followed your points. The point is exactly that I'm not sure that I can see agency in the choice of these iconographies of the coins, because the agency is the agency of the women in their life, but when they come on the coins, it's a male decision how they are represented and they get on the coins.
This is a great point of view. Yeah, I like it.
And I agree with you. You said it very clearly about the choice of the motives on the coins, that it's a matter of authority. That's very clear in your chapter. What I was saying, what I meant is that in the Roman Republic, we know that it's the tres viri monetales, choosing the iconographies and putting their names on the coins. In the imperial times, we're not so sure. So you followed, if I'm not wrong, in your book, Barbara Levick's theory about the choice of the types of the coins, which is Barbara Levick herself has changed her mind a couple of times in her life. So we tend always to say, did the emperors choose? Did someone choose for the emperors? Was it directed at the emperors? And so on and so forth. We are not very sure. But whoever was choosing these coin types was probably a man. That was my point.
Yeah.
And even if he was acting out of respect and out of the will of the emperor that his wife, for instance, or his mother or his sister were represented, still there was some male officer.
Yes, yes.
And I think that it's something that we should always remember, that even where we have these aspects of female agency, it's still filtered by a very patriarchal society, which filters this female agency. That was my point.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry again. I'm sorry for having to interrupt you in your talks. But on the other side, I'm very glad that this panel brought so many discussion, and also it showed how much you have to read, to discuss in the future. And I'm very glad to that this last session showed that the project EuGeSta was very successful in presenting so many new research, so much books, and I hope that so many books, and I hope that in the next year we continue. I would like just to thank you very much for being here, presenting your books, commenting also the books, the other speakers, and thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Jacqueline, to her to give the last words, and thank you a lot.
No, I am nothing to say. Thank you very much for the respondent have indicating some way, interesting way of thinking about the topics in the book. So thank you very much.
Okay, well then, goodbye until 2025 to EuGeSta Cycle of My Teens. Thank you, bye.